nice to see everybody. Thanks for coming. We had to get bigger places to do these days, so hopefully everybody's able to find a seat. I see if there are folks standing in the back, there are a couple in the front here if you want to find a seat. I know Sheriff Dave just gave the ground rules. A couple other ground rules I would simply say. We are Wisconsinites. That means we treat each other with mutual respect, even if we disagree with each other. Sound like a plan? Yeah. Great. Other thing is, I'm your federal representative, so let's stick to federal issues. I have nothing to do with trash collection. Nothing at all. All right? Can't do anything about that. So let's stick with federal issues. With that, those of you who are accustomed to my town hall meetings, I'll start off with a presentation. I thought I'd talk about an issue that's, I think, on the front of everybody's mind, which is just the economy and jobs. Let's talk about that. And then I just want to open up. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers, and we'll just go around the room and take it. Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see if this is going to work then. What is holding our economy back? And more importantly, what can we do to get it back on track? Well, let's look at the state of our economy right now. Here in Wisconsin, I think this number is a little misleading. The Wisconsin unemployment rate stands at 7.8%. The national unemployment rate is 9.1%. Problem is, if you're in southern Wisconsin, it's a whole lot higher than that. The southern Wisconsin rate is above the national unemployment rate. An unemployment rate that I look at a lot, I hope you people over there can see me. I'm going to try and stand to the side so I'm not blocking folks' views. I look at the U6 unemployment rate. That is the one that measures not only people who are out of work but looking for a job, people who are out of work that stopped looking for a job because they tried for a long time, or people who are working in temporary jobs and are still trying to get a permanent full-time job. That rate is the highest we've seen in years, 16.5%. 6 million Americans have been out of work for over 6 months. The economy has been stagnant. Not only do we get hit with a hard recession, a very deep one, the so-called recovery has been very tepid, very stagnant. We grew at about 1.3% the first half of this year. It's picking up a little bit, but if you want to start adding jobs to your economy, you've got to grow your economy by at least 3%. Poverty is up to 15%. Now, there are two basic headwinds, I would say, that are hurting the U.S. economy today. The first headwind is Europe. Now, that's not necessarily something we can control, but it's certainly a story we should get a lesson from. And here's what's going on in Europe. They are in the middle of a debt crisis. Turn on the news today and you'll hear about the latest plan to try and save Europe from crisis, from a huge recession, from a banking crisis. In 2008, the toxic assets that were mortgage securities that were bringing down the American banking system threw us into a recession. Well, now, in 2011, the toxic asset that is threatening to take down the European banking system is government debt. And the problem that they have in Europe is a similar problem that we will have here, that we have now and could get worse, is government debt. European countries, whether it's Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, they let their debt get too big. Their debt, in many of these cases, is larger than their entire economy. And so what you have there are generations of politicians who made a whole bunch of empty promises to citizens that could never be paid for. So they borrowed and they borrowed and they borrowed, and there's no way they can pay all of this money back. So these empty promises are now coming due, and their banks are full of these government debts, which are now being defaulted on. They're going to default or restructure Greek debt so that it only pays half the money. That is a threat to us because, number one, they're the second largest trading partner we have. Number two, if they have a banking crisis, that could hurt us and affect us. So that storm coming over from Europe could affect us. Now, look at where we are. Our debt, our gross debt, is already at 100% of our economy. In a few days, we project right around Halloween, actually. Sorry, some people have to stand. I'll articulate these things. I know for those of you, this basically is the debt of the different countries: Spain, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and the United States. In a few days, our gross debt will exceed the size of our economy. Our economy is about $15 trillion. Our debt is going to hit $15 trillion in a few days. So look at where our debt is going. This is the Congressional Budget Office forecast of the federal government's debt. And what economists tell us is, once your debt gets over 60% of the size of your economy. If you're borrowing, if you owe as much as 60% of your economy, that's when you can really have some problems. That's the danger zone. You want to avoid that. We're already over that.
Thanks.
When your debt gets to 90% of the size of your economy, that is when your economy really starts to slow down. That's the story of country after country that has let their fiscal problems get out of hand. And look at where we're headed. We're almost there, and we're on a way for our debt to be double, triple, quadruple the size of our economy. This is the current law, the current government we got, the current pathway of debt. And so we have this storm on our horizon. And I would simply say the reason we have it is because politicians from both political parties in America, Republicans and Democrats, have made a whole bunch of empty promises to people in this country that the government has no means of paying, and therefore the debt gets out of control. So the sooner we get a handle on this situation, the better off we are, the more likely we can prevent a European debt crisis from becoming an American debt crisis. The second headwind that is hurting our economy is government, is Washington. Now this is clearly my opinion, but my opinion is based on historical evidence, based on economics, but mostly based on the hundreds of business tours that I have conducted with employers around the 1st Congressional District in southern Wisconsin. I do a lot of my roundtable meetings right in this room, right here at Chris Awney's place. And we talk to employers all the time. I did a roundtable with manufacturers just about a month ago. And I get the same concerns and the same questions. And here is basically what we hear. First of all, the goal of getting us out of recession was addressed with a stimulus plan. Now, the idea behind that at the time was that if the government could go borrow some more money and spend it through different government agency programs, that would heal our economy. That would create millions of jobs, prevent unemployment from going very high. And so that bill passed. It was about $862 billion, $1.1 trillion when you add the borrowing costs. The budget that was passed in 2009, the one we're living under now, automatically increased government agency budgets by 23%. But when they passed the stimulus, that increased those budgets by 84%. So over a 2-year period, we gave an 84% increase in the budgets of our domestic government agencies. That budget calls for spending $46 trillion over the next 10 years. Now the thinking behind that was, if we do all of this spending from the federal government, that will create economic growth, jobs, and prevent unemployment from getting out of control. This dark blue line is what they claimed was going to happen if we passed the stimulus. And what would have happened if we didn't pass the stimulus was unemployment would get near 9% and then come down later on. Well, what actually happened after passing the stimulus was the complete opposite of what was intended. Unemployment went up to 10%, and now it's hovered above 9% ever since then. So we never got the millions of jobs that were purported to be created. Unemployment went way above the 8%. And what I'd simply say is that simply did not work. And it fueled lots of uncertainty. And here's the kinds of uncertainty that this economic approach has fueled and why it's contributing to hurting our economy and suffering jobs. Tax uncertainty. This is one I hear so much from small business people around the state. In 2013, in 14 months, the top effective federal tax rate goes to 44.8%. The Senate is moving a bill that the President supports that proposes a new surtax that gets it up to over 50%. That means when you add state and local taxes, that's a 60% tax rate. Now, a lot of folks will say, well, this only gets, the baseball player, the movie star, the Wall Street CEO, the millionaire person. Here's the problem and what it does to us. In America, most businesses file their taxes as individuals. In Wisconsin, 90% of our employers are not corporations. They're small businesses that file their taxes as individuals. 9 out of 10 of the businesses in Wisconsin, drive out to the Elkhorn Industrial Park, 9 out of 10 of those businesses pay taxes as individuals. We call them pass-through organizations like subchapter S corporations or LLCs or sole proprietorships or partnerships. And so the top tax rate on those businesses is going to 44.8% in 14 months, maybe 50%, if what all the talk in Washington prevails. And the problem with this is a couple of things. Number one, we want these small businesses to grow. We want them to keep producing jobs because most of our jobs come from these businesses. Most of the jobs in America do not come from the very large Fortune 500 corporation. Most of our jobs in America, especially in Wisconsin, come from medium and small businesses, manufacturers. We want them to grow. And if we're telling them that they're going to have a massive tax increase in 14 months, that makes it really difficult for them to plan and for them to hire. More to the point, our foreign competitors have sort of learned this lesson, and they're lowering their tax rates on their businesses. Canada, by January 1, will lower their tax rate on their businesses to 15%, while ours is going to 44.8%. I mean, China's at 25%. You know, England's going down to 22%, and yet we're saying in 14 months it's going up, and people don't know just how much it's going up by. So it really hurts our ability to create jobs. 63% of our manufacturers, which is a big sector of our economy in Wisconsin, file as individuals, and that's something we just can't ignore. Big issue plaguing businesses and employers. Congress passed a lot of laws in 2009 and 2010, several multi-thousand-page bills, and now the regulations from them are coming out. The total cost of federal regulations every year is estimated to be about $1.7 trillion. That's compliance costs that businesses, sort of like a hidden tax that they have to comply with. That's $1.7 trillion out of a $15 trillion economy. Last year, the federal government issued 3,573 new regulations. This year, the federal government is planning 4,257 new regulations. 219 of those planned regulations are estimated to impact the economy by each over $100 million. I'll give you one example. It's called Cement Map. It is a regulation that is estimated to put 20% of our ready-mix concrete factories out of business, so that we will have to rely on more imported concrete to use for concrete. Think about cement and construction and how much it's used. Think about the concrete factories we have here in Wisconsin. We've got quite a few. But think about what concrete goes into. It goes into everything we build. It goes into houses, it goes into restaurants, it goes into everything. Raising the price of it, shrinking the supply of it, things like that actually cost us jobs, cost the economy. So it's not as if these regulations are free. They actually do have an impact. The healthcare law has produced, you got to see my mail. The healthcare law produces so much uncertainty on businesses because they just don't know what this is going to end up costing them. What are the rules, what are the regulations, the various taxes and penalties, and the new costs that they'll have to incur. The law produces 159 new boards and bureaucracies and programs that are now being implemented. It's got about a 4-year rollout between 2010 and 2014. A little over 1,400 businesses got waivers from the law because they were just proven to be so onerous, but every other business didn't get a waiver. So only about 1,400 in America got waivers from these laws, but all the other employers in America are being saddled with this. It is a law that I would argue is basically designed to encourage employers to dump their employees in the federal government health care plan. Because of all the restrictions and the taxes, it makes it an easier decision for an employer to not offer health insurance for their employee and put them in the government program. Because employers right now are just beginning to sort of see how much it's going to cost. So all of that uncertainty makes it harder for an employer to knowingly and willingly hire somebody when they don't know one of the biggest costs of hiring a person, healthcare benefits, what those costs are going to be. Or if they're even going to be willing to incur those costs in the future. So it's putting a huge chilling amount of uncertainty. The last point I'll make is the first point I made, which is debt. Here's what happens when we have a debt crisis. Your interest rates go up through the roof. Your tax rates have to go up to service the debt. And you have to engage in what we call austerity. You have to immediately start slashing spending. And the kind of spending you have to slash is the kind that people count on the most. What's going on in Europe is that they are now cutting benefits for current retirees after they've already retired, cranking up taxes on their economy, making it harder for young people to get jobs. Their youth unemployment is extremely high, and they are now slowing down their economies. That is what we want to prevent. But the point I'm trying to make is time is of the essence. The sooner we deal with our debt situation, the better off we're going to be. The better off we can make sure that we don't take benefits away from people who've already retired and organized their lives around them, the more likely we don't have to keep cranking up taxes, which ends up slowing down our economy and costing us jobs. Now this chart basically shows you why time is of the essence. The General Accountability Office puts out a statistic every year which tries to measure our unfunded promises. They call it an unfunded liability. What this basically means is how much money is the government promising current Americans? How much spending in programs is Washington promising you that it does not have any money to cover? That's what this is. So how much money are being promised to current seniors, current workers, and their children, minus what we can afford to pay, what we have money for? In 2009, that number was $62.9 trillion. That number went to $76.4 trillion in 2010. Today, that number is $99.4 trillion. What this means is, every year Congress fails to do something about our debt, about our empty promises that government is making to Americans, we go more than $10 trillion deeper in the hole. To give you a sense of what this means, the way this statistic works is, if we came up with $99.4 trillion today, just somehow magically, it just appeared in this room, we would have to take $99.4 trillion, set it aside, invest it at treasury rates, just to be able to pay for keeping the promises that government is making to current Americans today. That just shows you how far out of whack our fiscal imbalances are. And so, what are we doing about it? This is the key question. And I just believe, as your employee, if I don't like the direction that Washington's going, and I really don't, then it's not enough to just criticize the direction. I owe it to you to offer solutions, propose alternatives, to come up with different ideas to try and fix this problem. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And so there are a number of things we've been doing this year, passing legislation to try and get a handle and a grip on this situation. The first thing we did, which I wrote, is the budget. I mean, go figure. You know, in casinos, they have a budget over in Restraints. Marinos, they have a budget here. You know, the Monte Carlo room, Crisoni has a budget. Elkhorn City Council has a budget for Elkhorn government. The county of Walworth has a budget. The state of Wisconsin has a budget. Federal government hasn't had a budget for 2 years. We're still living under the 2009 budget. The Senate has not passed a budget for over 900 days. They have already said that they're not going to pass a budget next year. That's 3 years then that the government will go without a budget. And the way the process works, the way the law works, we have a law called the 1974 Budget Act. And it says that the House and the Senate have to pass a budget by April 15th. So April 15th is also tax day, but for Congress it's also budget day. You know, that they slipped a little bit, but Congress has traditionally always passed a budget. But if one of the two chambers doesn't pass a budget, the House or the Senate, then the whole process stops and no budget continues. And that's what happened. So we passed the budget. We proposed lots of things in our budget. Lots of spending restraints, lots of spending reforms to get this debt under control. And I'll explain exactly what we do to the debt. Pro-growth tax reform. This is something we passed back in April. I'm glad it's becoming discussed much more. But we're saying let's have a fair, simple, and competitive tax system, meaning get rid of all the different tax loopholes, get rid of all the different tax earmarks, and then lower everybody's tax rates. Stop picking winners and losers in Washington based on who you are or who you know. Get rid of that stuff so you can lower everybody's tax rates and make American businesses, you know, especially those 90% of our businesses that are small businesses that are filing as individuals, give them a more competitive tax system so that they can compete in this global economy. Predictable, reasonable regulations. It's important that businesses know what the world looks like in the near future. And when you're sending so many new regulations at them that they have no idea of really knowing how to quantify, it puts a huge chilling effect on investment and hiring. So we've passed a number of regulatory reform bills to get a handle on that. Patient-centered healthcare reform. We can get into this more later. I would simply say you need to repeal this healthcare law and replace it with patient-centered healthcare that gives people and businesses a better sense of what things are going to cost, of how much healthcare is going to cost. Because right now I think we're going in the exact opposite direction. Energy policy. We passed very comprehensive energy reforms in the House this year. All of these bills are sitting over in the Senate right now, by the way. We have learned, because of new technology, that we have so much more oil and gas in this country than we ever thought before. Because of new drilling technologies that we now can use, we can make ourselves so much less dependent on foreign oil, which is the key driver of our trade deficit, and so much more independent of oil and gas. This would also create jobs in America. It would lower the price of oil and gas, and it would make us less dependent on foreign oil. So we want to do that. And the revenues we would take from that, most of this is under federal lands, which is locked up right now. The revenue that comes to the federal government of this, we would use to build infrastructure, to fix our highways and our bridges, and help reduce the deficit. And then strengthen the social safety net. This is something that I talk about quite a bit because I think it needs to be dealt with. We want to have a safety net in this country that helps people who cannot help themselves. We want to have a safety net in this country that helps a person, when they're down on their luck, get back on their feet and onto a life of self-sufficiency. But we don't want to tool the safety net so that it is geared toward giving a person an incentive to become dependent upon the government for the rest of their lives, especially if they're able-bodied. That drains them of their incentive and will to make the most of their lives. So we want to have a safety net, not a hammock. We want to have a safety net that gets people up and on their feet and that is designed to truly help that person who cannot help themselves. And I would simply argue that the way our system works today is not geared in the right way, and it doesn't reflect the economic employment realities of the 21st century. So we've got to retool that. I'm talking about job training and things like that. Now, here's what we basically propose to do with the culmination of our efforts in the budget we passed. Now, I know everybody can't see this. The red thing that looks basically like a tidal wave here, that is where our government is saying our debt is going. That's the country we have right now. That's the pathway we're on today. What our budget says is don't ever let your debt get to those danger zones. Don't let it get to that 60 or 90% of gross domestic product where you really start slowing down your economy. So we get the debt down, under control, and then we literally get it paid off over time. It's important to do that because then businesses and the economy knows that our interest rates aren't going to go through the roof. Then they know that we're not going to have a situation on our hands where we're going to have high inflation, high interest rates, high tax rates, because all that will end up doing is slowing down our economy and making it harder for us to live the American dream and pass the American dream on to the next generation. That all is in threat right now. We have never done that before in this country. We have never had a situation where we did not have the system that make our kids better off. We are threatening that legacy if we don't get this turned around fast. And if we don't get this debt turned around fast, it hits our current economy, and we'll find ourselves like Europe in just a couple short years. And so the point I'm trying to make is, there is a way to fix this. We can get through these moments. We can get this economy growing. We can get prosperity, and we can get this debt under control. And more importantly, we can do it on our own terms. The budget we passed does not change the benefits for people who are already retired or who are about to retire, who are 55 and above. You won't be able to make that kind of a commitment much longer if we get stuck into the throes of a debt crisis. So what we're simply saying is the sooner we tackle these problems, the better off everybody is, and the more we can ward off a European-style debt crisis, which would really hurt our economy even more. So let me just, with that, thank you for coming, and let's just have a conversation, and I'll open it up to questions. I think Smith is going to walk around with this mic, and I'll stand here, right? So I'll stand right basically here. And go ahead. How about the guy in the salt and pepper hair? Sorry, I want to emphasize the pepper there for you. And let's see some hands. And I'll just do it. How about the lady right here in the front? You see how, and I'll make Smith walk around here.
Good afternoon. My name is Ron Blazel. I'm a city letter carrier with the United States Postal Service. I know recently you've voiced support for HR 2309, which has been proposed by Representative Darrell Issa of California. I would just like to say that letter carriers and a lot of people in the Postal Service position is that 2309, which is co-sponsored by Dennis Ross, fails on several fronts to address the Postal Service's current financial burdens. First, it does not address the onerous congressionally mandated pre-funding payments for future retiree health benefits. Currently, the Postal Service is mandated to pre-fund retiree health benefits for the next 75 years over a 10-year period. Secondly, it does nothing to provide the Postal Service access to the $50 to $75 billion in excess contributions to the CSRS pension fund. The surplus contributions have been confirmed by 2 independent studies by the Hay Group and the Siegel Company. These 2 items alone, which are at the core of another broadly supported bipartisan bill, H.R. 1351.
Is that the Lynch bill you're talking about?
Yes, it is. Would put the USPS on firm financial footing and allow it time to adjust the business model for future mail market. The Lynch bill, H.R. 1351, currently has about 225 co-sponsors, so it has huge bipartisan support in the House. And the Lynch bill would transfer excess payments from the two retirement funds, which are paid for by USPS ratepayers and employee contributions. Absolutely no taxpayer funds are involved in this. It would transfer to the Postal Service's Retirement Health Fund and would have absolutely no effect on any current or future federal retirees annuity. At this time, I would like to ask if you have reconsidered and would like to become a co-sponsor of 1351, and if not, why?
I'm not going to co-sponsor either of them, because this bill is going to move pretty fast. I don't serve on this is the Government Reform and Oversight Committee. What I think is going to happen is you're going to have these bills come to the committee. They're going to do what we call a markup, which is a bill drafting session. And then out of that will come, I think, a compromise or a combination of these approaches, and then it will come to the floor. So I don't know what I'll be voting on because they haven't done that markup yet. So I talked to Daryl Isaac, his name's Daryl. I think what he's trying to do is gather all the different ideas out there and come up with a compromise that works. Here's the problem. Volume's down, what, like 60%? I mean, look, it's just a function of technology. You know, emailing is putting, you know, first-class mail in many ways out of business. And so you have a model for the 20th century, which is running into conflict with 21st century technology. And so we have a real problem. And this is coming pretty fast. The one thing I worry about, 75 years, by the way, we all actuaries measure the health of pensions on a 75-year basis. That's an actuarial term to make sure that you're protecting multiple generations. My concern is this. I don't want to do something that looks like it's a temporary fix and then it ends up hurting people's pensions. So I worry if we're shifting pension contribution and pension money over to operating costs, that if we have another recession, which I'm very worried about, and pension values go down again, then I worry if we're going to have a big pension shortfall. And then those workers who spent decades working at the Postal Service wind up without a full pension. And so, to me, you have to be very careful that when you're trying to patch a current problem with money, you don't put people's pensions in jeopardy, number one. Number two, I want to make sure that whatever fix is done to keep the Postal Service from going bankrupt so they can keep operating. I mean, everybody agrees with universal service, meaning, you know, wherever you live in Elkhorn, or if you live up in, you know, Richland Center or Milwaukee, you ought to be able to put a stamp on something and send it somewhere and get mail. I don't know if anybody who disagrees with that goal. I just want to make sure that whatever we do is not a temporary fix, but actual or restructuring that permanently fixes the Postal Service, so that we don't wind up in the same position a couple years later, but with less money in the pension fund. That's just so you know what's driving my concerns about the issue. But I'm keeping a complete open mind on these things. I've talked to Steve Lynch about it as well. That's the Lynch guy you're talking about. And my guess is what they'll do is they'll go to committee, they'll have amendments, they'll rewrite a bill, and a third bill will evolve out of that, and then that's what we will be seeing on the floor. So I'm going to see what the legislation looks like when it arrives. But I've read the mail, I appreciate your points, and I completely understand the position you come from. It's the lady up here, Smith, in the brown. Wait for the mic if you don't mind.
My name is Denise Lazio. I reside in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, not very far from here. I am a legal immigrant, and my pet peeve, I think...
You're legal, you said, right?
Legal!
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure. You have an accent, okay? I just want to make sure what you said. I was going to say, there's a lot of law enforcement here. Yeah.
So my big pet peeve is illegal immigrants. One of them is pregnant women crossing the border to give birth to an American, because anybody born in American soil becomes a citizen. There was talk of changing this, and I wondered if it has been pursued.
It has not. People call this anchor babies, which means someone can come here unlawfully, illegally, and then have a baby and it's born here and then it's an American citizen. I believe that is a constitutional provision, meaning there is a debate as to whether or not Congress can simply pass a law changing the definition of citizenship. Or is that in the Constitution, which it is, and you'd have to amend the Constitution to change the definition of citizenship. There's a big legal debate about that, and I think what many people believe is you have to actually literally change the definition of citizenship in the Constitution. I'm not so sure we want to go down that path. I understand the frustration, but I don't know if we want to open that can of worms up. Why don't we address the issue itself is the way I look at it. Let's just address the issue of illegal immigration in the first place. I mean, so we're dealing with the symptom of a problem without treating the problem. So let's deal with the problem. So I think there are about 5 or 6 things you need to do, and I won't bore you with all of it, that we're not doing to get a control on our border, to get our immigration system fixed. It's not working. But more importantly, the system of legal immigration has become extremely complicated and difficult as well. And so the harder you make it for a legal immigrant to get their visa, get a job, or to marry somebody, to use a visa, the more likely you'll have illegal immigration. So to me, you got to fix both the legal immigration system, which is convoluted and broken, and you got to fix first and foremost the problem of illegal immigration, which typically in this case is southern border crossings. That to me is just the source of the problem, and I want to fix that problem. Now, I think you have to go after identity theft, where people take other people's identities, social security numbers, and work illegally in society. You got to go after that. And I don't think we should do a national ID card. I actually think that that's a bad idea for civil libertarian reasons. Plus, I don't think these databases, when they're centralized, really work. I think there's a better way to do it, and I actually co-authored legislation with Gabby Giffords. You guys have all heard of Gabby by now. Co-authored legislation with Gabby, Sam Johnson, and others to get at identity theft and worker verification at the job so that a person can't illegally take somebody's identity and then for work in this country. I think there's a better way to fix that. Then you got to beef up your border security. That's a longer conversation, but the point is, it's not working. There's a lot more that can be done to fix that. It is a federal responsibility. And then the third thing is, I think you need to have an immigration system that makes it easier if a job is not being taken by a citizen. And that's the key thing. If a job is not being taken by a citizen, nursery growers around here use guest workers. Somebody wants to come up temporarily and then come back. Have a system that works that way, so they don't have a incentive to take their whole family, but they can just come up for a season and go back. You have tamper-proof ID cards to allow them to do that. So you take pressure off of illegal border crossings so they can come through a regulated border. To me, the national security threat is the drug runners, some of the terrorists and criminals are trying to integrate themselves along with economic immigrants, and they're coming up into our country. If we can separate the economic immigrants from the people who mean us harm, who want to sell our kids drugs, I think that can go a long ways to helping us interdict the border. So I would rather do those things than try to go into rewriting the Constitution and its definition of citizenship, because I just think that's an effort that just won't go. Take years, and I just don't know if we want to go down that path. Let's start moving around. How about the guy in the back with the glasses who has his hand up? I'll just do 1 and 2 at a time. Is there a lady? Is that how about the lady in the tan, I guess? Is that off yellow mustard color or whatever?
Good morning. Tony Glady from Elkhorn. I guess my concern is I'm all in favor of repealing and replacing Obamacare, but with not enough votes in the Senate and the likelihood of not getting enough votes this next election cycle, I guess I'm wondering what can be done in terms of defunding the apparatus that would carry Obamacare out and killing it off that way rather than waiting for 60 votes in the Senate.
Well, first of all, the good news is you don't have to wait for 60 votes in the Senate. You ever heard of reconciliation? And people who watch this fight learn that part of Obamacare, the President's health care law, was passed through what we call reconciliation. Fiscal bills, budgets, those can't be filibustered. It's the one thing that cannot be filibustered is budgets or fiscal policy if it goes through the budget process. That only needs 51 votes. And much of this law, if not most of it, is a fiscal impact, has fiscal impacts. Taxes, fees, spending, things like that. And so you don't need 60 votes to deal with that. Point one is, that's point one. Point two, we've passed repealing it, we've passed defunding it, but if you don't have the Senate and the White House, that doesn't go anywhere, obviously. So you do have to have a change in leadership. You have to have a change in, I mean, this, you call it Obamacare. Obama's our president. I don't think he'll sign a law repealing the thing or even defunding the thing if he continues on as the president. If you don't have the Senate, you can't even pass it through the Senate. So, you know, elections do have consequences. And he and his party did have total control of the government in 2009 and 2010, so they were able to pass what they wanted to. That's where we are. Now, I think this law is a disaster. I mean, I don't think the healthcare system will survive this law. I think it will collapse under its own weight. But I would rather repeal it and replace it first than afterwards we have all this collateral damage of our healthcare system. I'll just give you one case in point. What a lot of folks don't know is this law rewrote Medicare also, and Medicaid. I mean, how many times have you come to town hall meetings where people were talking about stop raiding the Social Security Trust Fund and spending Social Security on other government programs? Well, this law starts that with Medicare. This law took $500 billion from Medicare to spend on the new Affordable Care Act for under 65-year-olds, for this new entitlement. And then what it did is it put this board called the IPAB, this Independent Payment Advisory Board of 15 people. The president appoints them starting in 2012, and it puts a total cap on all of Medicare spending, and then it lowers that cap. The estimates vary around about $500 billion. And the IPAB, this board of 15 people, it is their job to cut Medicare by lowering reimbursements to providers. And the problem with this, I have a lot of problems with this, it's designed to go around Congress. In the past, if you're going to change Medicare, Congress does it. Your elected representatives. Now, this law delegates to a group of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats the sole power to put these things into being, into law. And if Congress doesn't like it, it has to have a supermajority vote to overturn it, and then it has to replace cuts in Medicare to some other cuts in Medicare somewhere else. So the whole intent of this is to have these unelected bureaucrats basically reducing reimbursements to providers to the point where the chief actuary at Medicare is now telling us by the end of the decade, Medicare will be reimbursing all your healthcare providers at rates lower than Medicare will be reimbursing all of your healthcare providers at rates less than Medicaid. What that simply means is they're just going to stop offering Medicare. They're going to stop taking Medicare patients. So I really believe it's going to collapse the system. Not just the Medicare system, but I also think the way the law is designed is it basically encourages a business to dump their employees in the government exchange. As a business, you have to offer your employees, a business of 50 or more employees, you have to offer your employees the exact actual equivalent kind of insurance that the government plan has. And here's the problem. The government will under-reimburse providers. So that they're going to get about 60 cents on the dollar according to Medicare, actuaries. So when they lose 40 cents on every dollar for everybody coming in healthcare that way, they overcharge the private payers. They overcharge private insurance and private companies offering health insurance to their employees, so their prices go up. So if you're an employer and your prices are going up and up and up, but they can get, your employees can get the same insurance over here with subsidies, you're going to dump them. And here's why. If you get it wrong as an employer, if you do anything wrong that doesn't meet the federal definition of the kind of insurance you must provide your employees, it's a $3,000 per employee fine every year. But here's the catch. If you want to get rid of offering health insurance to your employees, put them in the government plan, it's $2,000 per employee, indexed at inflation. So what do you think businesses are going to do? I mean, the surveys we're seeing coming in, whether it's McKinsey or Lewin, are telling us that the majority of employers are looking at this situation and saying, there's no way I can afford to keep doing this. What if my competitor, puts his employees in the exchange and he goes from, $17,000 a year per employee to $2,000? I can't compete with that. So what we're worried about is if this law actually sticks and really kicks in 2014, you're going to just see an avalanche of people being dropped from their employer health insurance and put into the government health care plan, which will explode the costs. And so this is why I think it's going to collapse the system. And this is why, I really believe we need to repeal the law, start over. The system needed fixing before, no two ways about that. But I think there are just far better ideas that can get us to what we need to get to, which is affordable health care for everybody, including people with pre-existing conditions. I think you can get there without having this government system take it over. I'm sorry that took a little while, but it's a big question. How about the...
I'm from Elkhorn, and in relation to the Obamacare, I have a question. I heard recently, and I don't know if this is true, but as part of this law, the states are being asked to set up these exchanges, and my understanding is that this is not mandated in the law. It's almost like it's voluntary for the states to set these up, and if the state chooses not to set this up, then the federal government would be required to come in and set these exchanges up. But I heard that to do this part of the operation is not funded, which means if the state chooses not to do this, the federal government has no money to do this. So in essence,
it's an unfunded mandate.
Right.
Yeah. So
is that true? Or?
Yes. Essentially, what you said is true. It's a little more complicated than that, but yes. So if states don't do it, then the federal government steps in. There is a funding issue involved in that. For states doing it, they do get funding to set up the exchanges. The concern, and I know they're grappling with this in Madison right now. I'm not precisely sure how it's going to end up. The concern is, if you begin to set up this exchange, then you're really sort of implementing this law and going into the path of this. If you don't do the exchange, then you'll get penalties from the federal government for not doing it. And the federal government will then step in and more or less set up a federal exchange to replace it. Exchange is not necessarily a bad word. It just depends on how you do it. I've had exchanges in the bills I've had before. As I see exchanges, it isn't the federal government telling you where you got to go and how you got to buy your health care, what kind of health care. An exchange simply should mean, in my opinion, that you ought to be able to have an easy place to go to, like a website, to find out all your various health insurance options, and you can just choose. And if you want to buy health insurance out of an exchange or in another state, great. But it should be a facilitator to make it easier for people to see in an easy way, an apples to apples, a way to buy insurance. This exchange works a whole lot different than that. This exchange says you have to be in a federal exchange or a state exchange that is sanctioned as meeting federal criteria if you want to get these subsidies. If you want to get... So first of all, everybody has to have this health insurance because we all know about the mandate, right? That's the whole court issue. So every American is mandated to buy the federally regulated and approved health insurance. And you have to get it in the exchange or at your work, and your employer has to give you the exact same kind of health care package. And if you don't do that, then you have a fine. And that's the whole argument about the Supreme Court. But if the state doesn't set up the exchange where you go to get your health insurance that's federally mandated and defined, then the state has penalties. And so that's what states are dealing with right now. They're supposed to be implementing this right now because, as I mentioned, the law is a 4-year rollout, 2010 to 2014, and each year there are different benchmarks and requirements among states and the federal government. So to this gentleman's earlier question, I would argue it's not enough just to defund, just to, even if like House and the Senate wins, we get control, it's not enough to defund because so much authority has already been granted. I mean, the federal government has all this authority under the law to do it, but a lot of this has been pre-funded already in the lame duck section of Congress and in other areas so that they can already start implementing lots of this law. So a lot of it is either mandates on states to require them to do things, Department of Health and Human Services kicking out all these new regulations in the healthcare sector. The Medicare cuts are starting to kick in right now. That stuff's already gone. It's being done, and Congress can't defund that stuff because it's already the cow is already out of the barn. And so you just got to actually go back and repeal the law. It was the guy in the glasses. And then how about the lady, the blonde lady? Wait. Oh yeah, I apologize. The mustard shirt. Yeah, I'm sorry, Smith. We'll do you. She's already over there, so let's get you next, okay? So the guy in the glasses and the lady in the yellow shirt.
Packer Gold.
Packer Gold. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. All right. My name's Robert Giovanni. I'm from Elkhorn. I've been attending these sessions for about 6 or 8 years, and although you just touched upon it, You have advised, as the chairman of the Finance Committee, you control the purse strings. And it's my understanding the Constitution says that the House of Representatives controls the purse strings. I'm confused as to seeing how this president has spent money that this country does not have. And additionally, a side or a second part of that question is, I listened to George Bush be accused of being a liar for 8 solid years. And I listened to what this president reads off the teleprompter, and most of it I know is untrue, and some of it is probably provable as an out-and-out lie. But the Republican Party, or no one I know of, calls him a liar, and I'm confused by that. Because a liar should be called a liar. And,
Amen.
Got one more point that I just have to make.
Okay.
But I thank my fellow citizens for their affirmative response. That is, this president also held up his hand and took an oath to that Constitution. And I am totally confused why he has not been impeached. Because
why
and I understand that Congress would not remove him from office because he's got the votes in the Congress. But at least we get those Democrats on record voting to support a liar. So thank you, Congressman. I appreciate the opportunity.
I'll go to the Joe Biden rule. Joe Biden used to always say, never impugn another person's motives. If you disagree with somebody on policy, then debate them on policy, but don't impugn their motives. And what bothers me, and I said this pretty clearly the other day, the language coming out of the White House is impugning people's motives. They're saying that Republicans that don't like that agenda, we're for dirtier air, we're for dirtier water, we're for less, we want the economy to suffer so he loses his job. We want people not to have health insurance. That's impugning motives. To me, that degrades the level of debate we have in this country. And it's hardly the kind of unifying force that we were told we were going to get in 2008. And so I have tried to call out the president for what I believe is extremely divisive rhetoric. The politics of division are just that, they're divisive. And we don't want to go down this path because it's just unhealthy for our country of pitting people against each other, of pitting one American against another American, of feeding into the fear and envy and resentment of people. That to me is just extremely dangerous. Not only that, it's not good for our economy because it just tells the producers, the small businesses, you're next. And it puts a chilling effect on that, I think. Now, the impeachment thing, look, impeachment is high crimes and misdemeanors. I don't know of where he is. He is engaged in a high crime and misdemeanor. We don't agree with his policies. I don't agree with his interpretation of the Constitution. I don't think that the Commerce Clause reads the way he thinks it reads when it comes to the mandate in health care. But, we're just going to have a disagreement about that, and the Supreme Court's going to settle that one. But that's a big difference from saying that he committed a high crime and misdemeanor. So, I just want to, I don't like what he's doing. I don't like this new divisive rhetoric he's using. And I obviously have a big disagreement with the policies because they're not working. And I never thought they would in the first place. And so I just feel, rather than go out and spend all my time, calling people liars or trying to take down people politically or just criticizing, and I do criticize, I think I need to spend even more of my time proposing solutions, offering alternatives. I'm your employee. I think that's probably what you want me spending the bulk of my time doing, and that's what I'm trying to do. Finally, the lady in Patrick Gold.
There you go.
Diane from Fontana, Wisconsin. We can only change all the things for the positive that you want to do, Paul, if we get a supermajority in the Congress and the Senate, and the next occupant of the White House is a clone of Paul Ryan.
Yeah. We're against human cloning.
Yeah. When you show all the graphs, the horrifying, prospect for the future, that is what the political left has been working diligently for decades. And it's finally just occurring to, I think, so many of us of what is ahead. And so I think it's up to every one of us in this room to get super involved in the next election so that we have the results that we want. And we, at this end of the room, we were talking about the fact that we've got to get young people involved. Our college kids have been so indoctrinated, and that's a question I pose to you. How do we get them involved because it's their future that's been bankrupt?
That's a very good question. We are in October of 2011. The next election isn't until November of 2012. Nothing frustrates me more than thinking nothing's going to get done between now and then. Because you know what? We got a lot of problems. So, number one, let me say, I still believe, or I'm at least going to keep trying, to find wherever we can get common ground to get something done on the economy. I mean, surely there are some things. We've passed over a dozen bills that are sitting over in the Senate right now, which were aimed at getting the economy growing, and I walked you through a few of them. So surely there's something. Because my concern is that they've kicked into campaign mode so early that in this division, this rhetoric of division, that it's making it even more polarizing. So having said all what I just said, I do believe that this election is going to be the most important one in our lifetimes. It doesn't matter if you're in Bob Webster's generation or my generation or my kid's generation. And the reason I say that, it's not because of Barack Obama, it's because of where America's headed. We are at that proverbial fork in the road in this country. It's a very precarious moment. And that we're going to have to make a decision what kind of country we want to be. What kind of people do we want to be? In the next couple of years, those decisions we make will determine the path and trajectory of this country for the 21st century. Because they just reverberate throughout. We will have a debt crisis soon if we don't get this under control. And then America will enter what I call a managed decline phase. I think there's two tipping points that are coming, and this is why, to get to your young person question, two tipping points are coming. One is we could quickly become a country of a net majority of takers versus makers, where more and more people who are able-bodied become net dependent upon the government for their well-being and their livelihood than upon themselves. That stagnates society. That atrophies creativity, imagination, innovation, entrepreneurship in society. It slows society down, but more importantly, it's bad for the people who become dependent because they don't reach their potential. The second tipping point is this one right here, debt. We're getting really close to the danger zone, to where it literally gets out of our control. The interest on our debt by the end of this decade gets to $1 trillion if interest rates stay where they are, which are being propped down by the Federal Reserve. So you think interest rates are going to stay where they are for a lot longer? I mean, so the situation can get out of our control. This affects the youth, because it affects not only a kid coming out of college, as whether he has an economy that can give him a job when he comes out of, but it totally affects the trajectory of our country and therefore the standard of living we have. I have the Congressional Budget Office every year run numbers for me, because I can as the chair of Budget Committee, on what they call the standard of living metric. Standard of living is measured as economic growth per person. And it's always been up. We have always in this country raised the standard of living, the economic growth per person, since we measured this in America. And what the computers at the Congressional Budget Office do, they have an economic computer model that measures the economy going forward, is they told me last year that the computer crashes in 2037. The computer could not conceive of a way in which the U.S. economy can continue on after that date because of the debt burden. Well, now it's 2029 when that crashes. I mean, literally, their computer just stops. The computer can't conceive of a way the future can continue. And that's right in the middle of some 18-year-old coming into college and then coming out into their productive years. So this affects them so much. The other thing is, what really kind of boggles my mind is, you know, when I was a kid, I did corn detasseling, I painted houses, I worked at McDonald's, you know, I did all these things, and it was character building, I thought. And I would hope that the song I wanted, you know, Stairway to Heaven or whatever it was, the song I liked at the time would be played on the radio. Today, with my iPod, I get it at the pick of a finger. The youth today, because of technology, have so much discretion in their lives, so much liberty and freedom in their lives. They get to make decisions for themselves in so many ways because of technology that none of us ever dreamt of when we were their age. And so why on earth would they want a government that takes away their decisions? Why would they want a government that in things like health care denies you the right to make choices for yourself and your family on how you get it, where you get it, who your doctor is? I mean, so in investing in a government that grows beyond its constitutional limits, in investing in a government that grows beyond its means, that borrows from their future, that cranks up tax rates, and takes over micromanaging certain sectors of our economy, it is denying them of the liberty and the freedom that they have just come to assume in their everyday lives. And so I think the key is to connect that trend and that trajectory with the reality that they know today and the freedoms and the liberties that they personally enjoy. And that connection has not been made very well. And I think we've got to work on that. The last point I'll make, and I don't know if this is going to come up or not, is our society was basically designed on an idea. America was founded on an idea. Our rights come from nature and God, not from government. And this idea is characterized by a country of upward mobility. My family came to Janesville basically when the potatoes stopped growing. You know, immigrants with nothing made family businesses. Everybody has their own story. You just came in your generation. But this has always been the land of opportunity. This has always been the land where the goal of government is to promote equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, not equality of results. And by promoting equality of opportunity, our goal is to get everybody at a level playing field at the starting line in life. And where we have to perfect this goal is making sure that that equality of opportunity can get to those people who've never seen it before, to the pockets of poverty in America, in our rural and urban areas. But if we change the goal of our government to seeing its role as promoting equality of outcome, it's basically another way of saying to people, you are stuck in your current station in life. No matter what you do, you're fixed in a class, and the government is here to help you cope with it. That's the kind of rhetoric we're hearing today, and that's what's destructive of the American idea. I reject that. That's not who we are. We are a society of upward mobility. We're a society of equal opportunity, and that translates into prosperity. And where we've got to keep working at it is making sure that prosperity and opportunity get into the hands of people who've never seen it before. That's what our goal ought to be. That's what it has been, and that's where we got a lot of work ahead of us, and let's keep going down that path. And that, to me, if I were a young person, which I like to think I'm still kind of a young person, only 41, that to me is really the premise that's on the ballot in 2012. Which of these two views do you want to dominate and define America going forward? And that's what's coming up. And I'll just leave it at that.
Relevant. Paul, you have visited our bank, and
yep.
On behalf of employees, I want to thank you. Two requests. A lot of media talks about the banking industry walked down our economy. If you could please help us to educate people that it was really investment firms.
Yes, exactly.
That brought down the economy. It wasn't community banks. And two, anything you can do to help repeal Dodd-Frank. It's a huge burden on community banks trying to help small businesses and individuals in our communities. So it's not about me, it's not about our bank, it's about what we're trying to do in our community and help the economy get back on the right track. So you could help us address the regulatory burden and the costs of Dodd-Frank. I'll be in Washington, D.C. on November 8th. When you won't be there, I'll be meeting with one of your staff members to discuss.
Yeah, we're here that week. Yeah. This is crony capitalism Exhibit A. No two ways about it. The financial meltdown had a number of sources, loose money from the Fed, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, but investment houses on Wall Street that took all these exotic instruments and sort of spread the fiscal contagion throughout the whole system, which amplified the crash and got us down. So this law, I think most people have heard of Dodd-Frank by now. It's talked about a lot. Maybe it was in good intentions, but the law is a total backfire. Because what this law ends up doing is it just makes the big banks bigger and the small banks smaller. It will lead to a giant consolidation into much larger banks. And so all it ends up doing, in my mind, is it amplifies this too big to fail doctrine. So those investment houses, which were not regulated under the banking system, basically then sought banking designation in the future for protection. Number one. Number two, what the government does under this new law is it says if they're a big bank that's considered systemically risky, meaning they're big and interconnected, and they could really wreck the economy, then they have this new designation, and they have a new set of rules that they have to play under. But what that does in the market is it says, these guys will get bailed out if it goes down. So they, the big banks, will be able to go out and get cheaper money than the community bank, than the regional bank, and they'll be able to knock you out of business. They will totally be able to outcompete the smaller regional banks. Why don't we just cut them down to size so they can't get us again in the future? That's my whole point. Instead, we're letting them get bigger. They are bigger now since this law. More to the point, this law makes it almost impossible for local community makers to customize credit to customers. You know, you have relationships with local business people, with farmers, with developers, or whoever, and you know the person. You can customize credit for them. This law, it's got a number of new organizations that are regulatory. It makes it almost impossible. Cookie cutters credit, so that it's standardized. So you can't compete by being a better local producer of credit in the community. You can't give the same vanilla loan that Chase gives, but Chase will be able to give it at a cheaper rate because they get their money cheaper because Washington said they're special and you're not. And so what that ends up meaning is we're just going to consolidate to a bunch of, we're going to have like 12 Fannie Mae and Freddie Macs on our hands. And so to me, this is one of those laws that is an example of the kind of philosophy that's dominating Washington right now, which is, if we believe in pursuing this sort of equality of outcome agenda, then the well-connected and the powerful, they'll call the shots. You know, this is corporate welfare, crony capitalism, whatever you want to call it. And it's the little guy, it's the entrepreneur who suffers as a result of that. And here's the problem. Both political parties have done this stuff. I mean, Republicans and Democrats, we need to face up to this. Have seen, from our standpoint, I think Republicans thought that they're being pro-incumbent business, they're being pro-free enterprise. And what Republicans ended up doing in the meantime was they ended up erecting a barrier to entry against this business's competitors. They were picking favorites. On the other side of the aisle, I think they just believe that big government and big business can join in a better common cause to have more central control over our economy and society. So from whatever way you approach that premise, the outcome is bad. You end up, if you have so much government like this, if you go down this path, it's just the people who are connected and are powerful, who are big, they call the shots, and everybody else is left hanging. And that is not an entrepreneurial economy. The whole point of our economy, the reason we've done so well, is because of small businesses, because of entrepreneurs, and because of equal rules. And we're getting away from that. And so to me, not only Dodd-Frank addressed issues that need to be addressed, it just addressed them in the wrong way. So I don't want to see big interconnected banks or financial brokerage houses have the power to, if they do something wrong, they can take down our economy. They need to be brought back to size or scope. So if you want to be a hedge fund, go be a hedge fund. But don't be a bank and also try to be a hedge fund. So you need to break these things down into scope so that we don't have a too big to fail problem. This is just one of those other issues that gets added on top of the election. Whoever's controlling the White House and Congress will decide whether this law stays and is further implemented or it goes and is replaced. And it's just one of those other consequences. It was Bob Hill, and then I was just looking for a lady.
There's one over there.
Okay, there's a lady over here, I think, right over here.
Hi, Paul.
Bob?
I'll try not to be too contentious this thing.
That's okay. I'm used to you.
But I would like to take offense to the gentleman that made reference to impeaching President Obama. One of the things he fails to recognize...
Well, first of all, let's not get into a crossfire within people here, so just reference me.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was elected by the one of the largest majorities of popular vote. George Bush did not even have the popular vote in his first election. But he had the support of a group who believed his war was a Christian crusade. Now, anyway, before I think I can talk about his war, having flown 200 combat missions in F-4 over northern Laos and North Vietnam. That war was criminal and immoral. It destroyed our economy and it destroyed our position in the world as a great nation. We are not, and I travel a lot. As you know, I just got back from my annual Christmas shopping trip in Europe. His war not only destroyed our economy and our position in the world, which we're having a hard time recovering, our National Guard and Reserve components have suffered tremendously through the loss of equipment, something that isn't, I don't know if it's being addressed right now, but we're going to have to re-equip the National Guard and the reserves with equipment that was destroyed in that criminal and immoral war. Paul, thanks. It's a great presentation. You've given an outstanding position on one side of the story. And
my side.
Yeah, your side. And that's great. And it's a funny thing. In difference from my wife and family, I still support you.
I have. Look, Bob and I go a long ways. Bob helps us select the academy, kids that go to the academies. You got two here today. We do that in this room or at Gateway. If that doesn't give you hope for the future, I got to tell you, seeing these young men and women coming out of our high schools, going to our military academies, we are producing out of our communities stellar peoples. You know, it's a neat thing to see. Bob and I know each other really well. I thank you for your service in Vietnam. You and I have had difference of opinions on these things. The Guard and Reserve, I think that's what your question is. You're right about that. I went up to the 115th Fighter Wing the other day up in Madison. You know, their F-16s, they're 1987 era. They're the 30 class. So these wars clearly has extended the burn rate of equipment. No two ways about it, for active and Guard. Here's the issue. We don't know what the Pentagon budget's going to be in the future because of the sequester hanging over the Select Committee. So the President, I actually took money out of the Pentagon. I do think that you're throwing $700 billion at any government agency, you're going to get some money wasted. And the Pentagon is no different than that. Here, I'm starting to go my way. The Pentagon is about half of our discretionary spending. Discretionary spending is the annual spending government spends, Congress spends on government agencies. Defense is $703 billion. Domestic government agencies is $650 billion. So real close to equal. That's 39% of government. The rest is all the entitlement or mandatory programs they're called. The Select Committee, if it doesn't produce its target of $1.2 trillion in savings, a sequester, which is an across-the-board cut, kicks in to get that amount of money. Half of that sequester must go to the Pentagon. That's the way it's designed. And so that could be a $600 billion cut to the Pentagon, but that's over 10 years. So don't compare 700 to 600. It's a 10-year cut. But it would dramatically reduce our defense capabilities and our ability to replace equipment. Now, forget about replacing equipment. We'd have to, I've seen lots of different scenarios, losing a carrier group, losing some divisions, shutting down fighter wings, shutting down Guard wings. You would have a huge contraction if they hit it with that kind of money. Now, I believe there should be savings, and we proposed that in our budget. But if you hit it like that, then you're basically gutting your defense and compromising your national security as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know the answer to your question because I don't know the outcome of the budget of the Pentagon. If the Select Committee gets its 1.2, then the sequester is turned off. If the Select Committee gets half of that, 600, then there's a $300 billion hit to the Pentagon. So you'll know by Christmas, probably, what the outcome of that's going to be. Or more to the point, if the Select Committee doesn't get its full number hit, 1.2, then whoever's president and running Congress in 2013 will determine the rest of it. The issue as to our readiness of our military, the equipment our military uses for the Guard, the Reserves, and the Actives, that will be one of those other issues decided by the election as far as I'm concerned. There was a lady back there, I think. It was, where are you, Smith? I can't see, there's a bright light shooting in through there.
Right here.
Okay, yep. Go ahead.
Oh, you're holding it. My name is Mary Blue from Muskego, and my question for you, Congressman Ryan, is kind of what the lady in Packard Gold touched on with the young people. I'll just give an experience and then quickly try to get to my question. I had a pleasantly surprising and delightful experience last winter to hear Michelle Malkin speak at Marquette, hosted by the Young Republicans, which I think you took part in at Miami. I have a daughter that went to Miami also, and was delighted to find that the Young Republicans hosting the evening, which that night by mention of your name, you got a standing ovation. That they're not geeky. They're young men and young women. They're very smiley, happy, pleasant, polite young people, and they really impressed me that night. So that's one suggestion that parents, grandparents, mentors, guardians, if the word Republican wasn't so toxic to many of the college-age young people, to encourage that. And then to my question, to use as a personal example, but not to get to stay general, not to get personal, when you and your wife will be discussing the next candidate for the White House, what are the 1, 2, or 3? What are the 1, 2, or 3 top qualities you could advise us to concentrate on as a strength? As a strength in the future occupant of the White House. Thank you.
With the U.S. That's the peanut gallery over here. So I'm sharing an effort which prepares for the eventual nominee. You know, a guy from Kenosha is the head of the Republican National Committee, Ryan Priebus. So Ryan's has me helping him with an effort, which means I can't endorse. So I'm just telling you that for the record. I'm not endorsing. And I don't know if this thing will be. My guess is by the time the Wisconsin primary rolls around, maybe not, but I guess the nominee will probably be sorted up by then. Our primary is sort of late. What I'm looking for, if we even really have a primary that matters by the time it rolls around Wisconsin, is it a person of conviction? Meaning, can you take this stuff on, and when the going gets tough, you don't go wobbling the knees. You hold tight. That's really, I just got to tell you, I've been through enough of these fights in federal government to know you've got to really believe in something. Because if you don't have deeply held principles, which I call the founding principles, then you'll abandon those principles at the first sign of duress. That's really important. Second, you know, is it a person that has a good agenda? Is it a person that has good ideas and has made proposals? I feel like this is a town hall meeting, so this is not a Republican meeting. Something tells me there are some people here who are not Republicans. But the point I'm making is the campaign is getting to a better phase. It's no longer a personality contest or who can get the best zinger at the other guy in the next debate. It's plans. How many of you have heard of 999? Hey, look at that. Look at that. But so, you know, you don't like it, but the whole point is you've heard about it. It doesn't matter if you don't. I'm not trying to say if you like it or not, but the point is you've heard about it. So here's a candidate who you may not like his idea, but he put an idea on the table. You know, he offered a solution. He came up with a plan. And what that is doing, and I think Herman Cain deserves a lot of credit for this in particular, is other candidates are bringing their plans to the table now. You know, I remember the Roadmap for America's Future. I put this thing out there in 2008. You know, we're now doing passing budgets. You got to put ideas and proposals and bold solutions on the table to actually make a difference. And I'm excited to see these candidates now entering what I call the idea phase of the campaign. Not the slogan phase, but the idea phase. And so now you're really going to be able to kick their tires and see, you know, who can best articulate what they believe in, and who has ideas, and who can defend those ideas, and who has good plans. That's, to me, the second most important thing. And the third most important thing is, can they win? You know, that's really important. It's got to be somebody who can win. And so those are the things: principles, policies, and electability. How about this lady here in the leather, and then somebody in the red in the back? I think that's the red. Yeah. Yeah, badger red. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I guess what I'd like to say is when we go back to Vietnam, very sad time. The Democrats that put us there. It was Kennedy, Johnson, it was the Democrats. Let's change it.
All right, I'll leave it at that, I guess. It was just a statement, it wasn't a question. You don't have to ask a question every time. If you want to just make a statement, you can do that too.
I'm Sheila Weber from Burlington. And, excuse me, I'd just like to ask, how would you respond to the fact that the 400 top income earners make more than about 150 million income earners? And are you in favor of having that top 1 to 2% of the privileged pay more to change this current scenario of makers and takers?
Right. It's a totally fair, legitimate question. Here's what I proposed on this particular issue, and what I think is the better way to go. Raising tax rates, when you think you're just catching a few people, you end up getting a lot of businesses. And I mentioned 90% of our businesses come from the tax code where you file as individuals. So it's not just, you know, the billionaire on a yacht, it's the manufacturer and the industrial part you're also getting. So you got to watch that. The second thing is, let's look at where I would call inequities in the tax code, and I think it's the loopholes. This is the individual side of the tax code. So this is the top, you can't, I'll verbalize this because I know not everybody can see it. The top 1% of taxpayers get all the tax loopholes. They get on average $270,000 per filer, per tax return. The rest of income taxpayers don't really get any of that. So here's my point. For every dollar that a person in that tax bracket, that category of income you're talking about, for every dollar that they park in that tax shelter, that dollar is taxed at zero. So what I say is get rid of the tax shelters, and then you can lower everybody's tax rates. So we can have tax rates that are more competitive, so we're not taxing ourselves at 44% versus 15% in Canada, so that, you know, a manufacturer in Elkhorn isn't paying, you know, double or triple the tax rate his competitor overseas is paying. But more importantly, you're getting them to pay more of their income toward taxes. So for every dollar in a tax shelter that's zero, get rid of the tax shelter, then you'll tax that money. So what I call, it's called broadening the tax base, lowering the rates. So take away their shelter, flatten everybody's taxes so we're more competitive, but subject more of their income to taxation and do it in a way that's better for the economy. Let me go to the corporate side of the tax code. We have one of the highest corporate income tax rates in America. Now, as I mentioned, it's not, most of the businesses aren't what we call corporations. In Wisconsin, it's 10%, but it's the big ones. It's Harley Davidson, it's SC Johnson Wax, it's Johnson Controls, it's Miller, you know, Brewing. They're corporations. And so some corporations have done really, really well at getting provisions put in the tax code that doesn't let them pay, that means they don't have to pay many taxes, while the rest don't. How many of you have heard of General Electric? All right, so I talked to their tax preparer. You know, it's a whole team of people. And I said, how is it that you guys made like $14 billion in profits and you didn't pay anything? I mean, it's all legal, sure. All these loopholes, they said, well, we had a very complicated tax system. I said, well, how complicated? He said, well, we just have, it's all legal, and we had many businesses, and it's a big complicated tax form, it's a complicated answer. Well, how big was your tax return? I said, well, we filed it electronically, we don't know exactly how many pages it is. I said, well, can you figure that out? I'd be curious. He said, yeah, I guess we could, I'll get back to you. Their tax return this year was 57,000 pages long. Can you imagine that? I mean, so there's a company, it's a good company, they hire a bunch of people up in Waukesha, but they have been successful at either contorting their business plan or getting Congress, and they in particular did, getting Congress to put provisions in the code that allows them to avoid paying taxes. Another big company that you know well, you see these brown trucks driving all over, UPS. UPS paid 34% tax rate, just 1% below what the statutory rate is. UPS's biggest foreign competitor is DHL, which pays a 24% tax rate. So we have a system that says GE can pay no effective tax rate, and UPS will pay a 34% effective tax rate, which puts UPS at a huge disadvantage against their competitor. What I'm saying is, move the loopholes out and just lower the average tax rate. GE's tax burden will go up, UPS's will go down, but we'll be more competitive, so we're not sitting in Washington picking winners and losers. If you're connected, if you do everything we want you to do, you don't pay taxes. The point I'm trying to get is, let's get to the theory or the philosophy or the policy. If you make the same amount of money, if you're a person or a business, you ought to pay the same level of taxes as the other person or business who makes the same amount of money. I think bigger point, let me say it this way. I believe that we should want to see the concentration of wealth in this country decentralized. Okay, wow, I thought you were a Republican. Huh? Here's what I'm saying. The government does not do that well. If you have the government do that, then guess what? If we have bureaucrats and politicians deciding this, it's the powerful that will call the shots. It's the Dodd-Franks of the world. There will be crony capitalism and corporate welfare, because that's what we got right now. So to me, we need to focus on equality of opportunity, and we need to focus on free enterprise and expanding it and making sure that more and more people in America can get access to it. We shouldn't shrink opportunity and shrink free enterprise and give more power to bureaucrats and politicians. We should reduce their influence in our lives and make it easier for people to rise up, to have more income mobility, to bring the bottom up. That, to me, is the kind of dynamic society that we've had, and that's what we want to continue and grow and develop. And so that's why I just think it gets dangerous when we start talking to people as if they're stuck in some class, or it's class against class. That's what they do in Europe. That's what we left to create here when we created this country. I want people who haven't been successful to become successful. I'm not worried about the people who are already successful. What we ought to be worried about is those people who want to become successful who haven't gotten there yet, and what are the barriers we can remove from them on their path, on their ladder of success. Education's a big part of that. I think there's a lot of issues with respect to getting skills, taxes, regulations. That's what we should be focusing on. And so if we focus on an idea that we should promote equality of opportunity and prosperity so that you can make the most of your lives, then we can revamp the American idea. If we change that trend and go to redistribution and equality of outcome, then I fear you will slow down our economy, you'll put more and more barriers to success for people rising up the income ladder, and then the people who are perched atop society will stay there, and they will, because they're going to be writing the checks, they will write the rules as well. And that's not the kind of society we want to have.
Paul, we got time for one more.
Yeah, how about the guy in the goatee right here? Wait for the microphone.
Hi, my name is Bill Sexton. I'm from Delvin, and I'd like your thoughts on consumption tax. It seems to me that there'd be no way to get around paying taxes. Everybody criminal, legitimate, everybody be paying taxes if everything was done a consumption tax. And I just wonder what you thought about that.
I like the idea of quite a bit of a consumption tax. There are different ways of getting at it. I've always been more of a flat tax fan. The flat tax, I mean, you remember Steve Forbes, Dick Armey, those guys pushing out. The flat tax is effectively a consumption tax, but through an income tax system. And the reason why I say this is, I worry a little bit, or a lot of it, about if we keep an income tax system and then we add to it a consumption system like a sales tax. That's one of the knocks on 999, which is then you have two tax systems growing in tandem with one another, stacked on top of each other, which is a very European kind of a system, and I think you could just increase the tax burden on society and slow down economic growth and really grow government. So I think you have to do one or the other. Of pure consumption, like a sales tax, if you do that, you'd have to get rid of the income tax system. And that's a constitutional amendment process you have to get rid of. Tough to do. But if you go through a flat tax style system, and I've written a few of these bills myself, you exempt savings and investment from taxation. So the money you earn in your salary or your wages that you invest is not taxed. The money you therefore end up consuming is taxed. So you can effectively tax consumption through an income tax system, but you don't get at the underground economy you're talking about. And so that is why, to your point, the virtue of a pure consumption tax system, which is a sales-based tax system, that does get the underground economy. And if you convert over to a system like that, then you want to deal with the issue of regressivity, because people who are lower income, all of their disposable income is consumed. People who are higher income, not all of their income is consumed, it's saved. And so there are ways of dealing with that through rebates and other structures. So I think you can get at the issue of regressivity, and you do capture that underground economy. The reason that I think is most attractive of a consumption tax is that it's very efficient, but also we can border adjust our taxes. If we do a consumption tax on our businesses, then we can take the tax off our exports and put it on our imports, which is exactly what our trade competitors do to us, and we do the opposite. We tax our exports and don't tax our imports. Puts us at a huge competitive disadvantage with our competitors. So I've always thought, at least if we're going to be taxing businesses, let's tax them that way so we can help our manufacturers better. But you have to deal with the regressive issue, and then you have to deal with, are we stacking a consumption tax on top of an income tax? If you can settle those things, then I think in a perfect world, it's the more ideal system. Well, hey, everybody, I appreciate it. I've got to head over to Kenosha. Thank you very, very much.